this is basically a rant, and I will admit I was kind of surprised I got accepted for this. I put it in when they were light on presentations, and they were saying, look, please can people put in more presentations? And then it went to a vote, I thought, okay, that's good. I'll just go along and heckle, but no. Somehow I actually have to talk about this. So, introduction, the obligatory introduction slide. Who am I? IT and Information Security the last 15 years now. I'm currently Director of Sales and Elements. We have another Director of Sales and Elements over there. And Scottish Chapter Lead for AWAS, and there's my email and Twitter. So, what do I want to talk about? Why it must die. Right. So pen testing has to die. It really does, and I'm going to start off with why it's got to die, and I've got 3 reasons I'm going to go through. And because I don't want it to die and have nothing left afterwards, because I'll be out of a job, I'm going to suggest that we actually do something to try and fix it, so that after it's dead, we can actually have something in place and pen testers can also have work to do. So, what's in the name? The first thing to do is, and this is one of the problems I'm going to start off with, is to talk about what actually is pen testing. So I did the obvious thing when you do this, and I went to Wikipedia. And I said, Wikipedia, what is pen testing? And it told me this. Penetration test, occasionally pen test, is a method of evaluating the security of a computer system or network by simulating an attack from a malicious source known as a black hat hacker or cracker. I'm not sure about calling them crackers anymore, but you know, apparently so. So what does that actually mean? Okay, it means black box. Bad guys don't typically know the, or you'd hope anyway, know the ins and outs of your organization. Most attackers numerically are coming from an external perspective, so they don't work with the full schematics of your system sitting in front of them. So it's black box. What else is it? Goal-based. We're just trying to compromise, right? If you ever get a test report and it says you have SSL v2 enabled on your web server, that wasn't a pen test. Because hackers don't care. They don't care if you get SSL v2 enabled because no one's ever exploited it, as far as I'm aware, in the lie. I'm happy to be contradicted, but I put it on lots of reports, but I've never seen anyone do it. It's got to be realistic. It's got to mimic the real thing. That's a form of pen test. I'm trying to emulate the real thing. But my first question, which real thing am I talking about? Am I talking about an automated bot that goes around the internet doing SQL injection on people? Am I talking about Anonymous because you've annoyed them? Am I talking about a foreign state? Am I talking about organised crime? One of the problems with pen testing is which of these things or all of these things is it meant to emulate? It's kind of in a lot of cases unclear. So, overloaded terminology. Everything's a pen test. Everything you ever get sold from a security testing company in a lot of cases has been described by someone as a penetration test. So they will say, vulnerability scanning is a pen test. I used to work in banks, and I'd read pen test reports, and I'd see what was blindingly obviously messes output. But the executive summary told me it was a pen test. Is that a pen test? I'd say not. Web application security assessment, this is far more common. You actually want an assessment of your application, and what you get sold is a pen test, or what's called a pen test. So when someone's buying it, how do they know what they're getting? Because everyone's going to call it the same thing. They're going to call it a pen test. Code reviews pen test even. Might happen. Yeah, anything else. Basically anything you've ever been sold by a security consultancy is likely to get called a pen test. And I'd argue almost none of them are. So, clients aren't ready for pen testing. That's why I definitely say. Why aren't they ready? What is the whole thing? Okay. So, we've said we're going to mimic attackers. We're going to do what the real guys have done. Anytime you do a pen test, do you have any pen testers people do testing in the audience? Okay. Have you ever had a scope that said you can do anything you want? Anytime you want, you can crash systems, you can do anything at all you like?
Yes.
Good. You actually have done a real pen test. In most cases, it's goal driven. Well, that's good. Because in most cases, you say to someone, is it okay if we're doing these buffer overflows, we might crash your servers. A lot of companies, clients will say, no, please don't crash our servers, because if you do that, the business are going to come and they're going to hit us for having crashed the service. And we're going to get kicked off site. And I've seen pen testers, and I've been on the receiving end, I've been told to stop testing while I was port scanning something, because I'd affected their internet-facing firewall.
Really, it's not just that, because they're not confident that they're going to bring back the server online.
Now that is, it comes down to confidence. A penetration test is designed to prove, or I think it should be designed to prove, that you are secure as you think you are, not to assess how secure you actually are. So if someone doesn't know how secure they are, well then they're not ready for a pen test. If you get someone saying at the end of a report, you hand them a report, you said, yes, I broke in. So that's a goal-based test. I broke in, and here's the systems I compromised, and here's the data I got. And they say, great, if we fix these things you broke in by, are we secure? Well, they didn't want a pen test. Because you say, well, actually, no, I didn't look for anything else, because I broke in. That's like what an attacker would do. They wouldn't go and find all the other 15 other ways they might be able to break in. But a lot of customers, what they actually want is assessment to say, Are all the obvious things on this system, on this environment, secure? Have they been fixed? Have we fixed the majority of them? That's what they're looking for, because they want to say if we fix those, then we're in a good place. If they've got that far and they think they're okay, then they're ready for a pen test, because then you can actually go in and say, can I compromise you? You don't think it's possible. And that's when you get your blank scope.
Do you really think business wants to do a pen test because they want to see whether you can break it around? They just
should.
want to do it because the policy says so?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's one of the problems. PCI is a great example. PCI in a lot of ways has a lot of good to it, because it's made people think about security, and they never would have if they hadn't had PCI. There's so many companies who wouldn't have touched security if it wasn't for PCI. However, one of the terrible things it does is it says you must have a pen test. And it uses those words. And that's what I'm saying, overload of terminology. Because there's no other word term for them to use, they had to use pen test. So they used pen test. And as a result, everyone's now going around saying, well, I have to have a pen test. I can't buy anything else from you, because I've got to pass PCI. PCI says I have to have a pen test. That's a real problem, because it means people are selling the wrong thing and they're buying the wrong thing. And people are also not delivering the stuff they want to be delivering. So, yeah, is exploitation okay? Are there no scope limitations? Are there no out-of-bounds hosts? You've ever been told, I've been told in tests, don't touch that one. Touch this one, this one, this one, and not that one. If you ever get that, it's not a pen test anymore. Because hackers aren't going to say, actually, you're right. That server's a bit overloaded today, I won't touch it. Not going to happen. So, and here's the bit this might be interesting. Mission impossible. I'd argue that even in the case where you get that blank scope, and you just get told, here's 2 weeks, do whatever you like, it's still pretty much impossible to accurately mimic current high-end attackers. Here's why. Feel free to argue. Where's the data? So these days, it's all about data. You're trying to secure the data. Where is the data? Is it in the company that you're actually working with, or is it in a third party? It's third party in scope of your test. Is it okay if I go and bounce to your outsourced code developer and try and hack in there and then come in through that angle? Bet you it's not, because I bet you their contract doesn't live for that. Cloud service provider in scope? Is it okay if I try and hack Amazon? I think Amazon's going to sign off on that, ever, for some client of theirs to try and penetrate their underlying systems.
I think Amazon do actually.
They'll let you, but what scope? Would they let you attack their admin's home PC?
Probably not.
So yeah, that's good, and that's heading in the right direction. And that's the next out-of-bounds methods. Fairly obviously, as a pen tester, you're not allowed to break the law, or it's not a very good idea if you want to remain working in pen testing. So spear phishing is probably okay these days. Some people will start buying into the idea. I mean, you look at RSA, how were they compromised? From what we've been told, email with an attachment. How were Komodo compromised? Email with an attachment. You can see a theme here. Right now, the majority of tests, and I'd love to see this happen more, don't allow client-side attacks. So you're not allowed to start emailing random people in the organization. And again, it's the same reason. If you work for a large organization and CEO phones up and says, hi, my machine just popped up saying it's got a virus on it, do you know anything about this? You probably don't want to say yes. Yes, actually, I commissioned some guys to try and break into your PC. That just wouldn't end well in a lot of large organizations. So, but again, hackers don't care. Home email? Can I attack the CEO at home? Can I attack the sysadmin at home? Probably not. It's illegal, it's not in the scope, you're going to get in trouble. What about renting a botnet with a zombie that's already inside the machine? Actually, I think that's a really effective way. There was a good survey on Zeus last year where they reckoned that they tracked the source IP addresses of people who were compromised with Zeus, and they said 77% of the FT of the Fortune 100 were represented in the clients that were compromised. So if I'm a hacker and I want to get into target company A, well, that's easy. I'll just go and rent the botnet that's already got the machine inside. Don't have to go through the perimeter. But again, pen tester, doubt it. Because it's illegal. So, depending on who your attacker is, doesn't work. Time. Yeah, last one. 0 days are becoming increasingly prevalent. You start to see if it's worth it financially, so it's actually viable. So if a target is sufficiently high value, someone will take the time to develop a 0-day exploit for a given piece of code. You can buy them, but not legally in a lot of cases. So it's ones you can't buy legally. So again, as a pen tester, are you allowed to buy them? Some of the forums you go onto, they're organised crime. Is it?
There's nothing in the UK law selling it.
Cool. Do you think clients going to buy off on that? I'd like to give £3,000 to a Russian crime syndicate to buy a 0-day to compromise your system. I just don't think they'd buy it. I'd love to think they would, and they should, because they're trying to emulate people who will go there. But I think that you put that in a sales document. You say to a customer, I want a budget for buying a 0-day.
Yeah, I was just arguing with the myth that you can't.
Oh, sure, okay. I think I'm talking about what you can do in a text. I agree. Legality is interesting. Sorry.
Given clients don't patch any of the known vulnerabilities, why do you need to buy 0 days to compromise the client?
That was my argument. The reason I'm putting that up, and sorry, I'll get to the next question in a second, the reason I'm putting that up is because I've seen a lot of chat in the pen testing industry about how if you're not using 0 days, you're not doing proper pen testing. And that worries me because you're dead right. People aren't patching the stuff that's out there. And if you look at the new Verizon thing that came out yesterday, the number of breaches that were responsible to a patchable or unpatchable hole were really low. So it's like, well, but I've seen that argument levied, and that worries me because I'm thinking people are going down this idea of I have to have someone who's going to go and buy a 0 day, otherwise I'm not getting proper pen test anymore. And that, yeah.
And there is another one, you probably underlying method or something, but within time, there is also the fact that some attacks require more time than 2 weeks should have been allocated. And if you were to conduct the social engineering attempts,
you want
in 2
weeks.
weeks there is only so much you can do. Whereas a potential attacker, if he's got
you see some companies starting to do that line of saying, and things like social engineering toolkit are starting to push people into the idea that social engineering is absolutely a fundamental part of a penetration test if you are trying to emulate an attacker who would use that technique, which is the critical point. It's who are you trying to emulate? So, fixing the problem. So the first thing I reckon, use different names for different types of job. Stop buying a thing just called saying I want to buy a pen test, and stop selling a thing that's just called a pen test. This is just a suggestion. And there's some stuff on our blog about this as well, actually. But maybe you just want a vulnerability scan. Say you've actually done your threat modeling correctly, and you've assessed that the given system is only ever going to be targeted by non-targeted people, by opportunistic attackers. So what you want to do is emulate an opportunistic attacker. You don't want to go in there really heavy, because what's the point? If you've done your threat modeling and you've come to the conclusion you only think opportunistic attacks are there, well, maybe you want to use an opportunistic testing method.
Can any organisation outside of maybe government really understand who their threat agents will be that will target their system? Do you have the intelligence?
I think you have to take a stab at it, because right now the problem is the problem is you can look at someone and you say what type of data is typically attacked and breached, and card data, for example, is a red flag. You know if you've got card data, you're a target. You know if you do something which people are going to potentially find objectionable, you're a target. If none of those things apply, are you a target? Yeah, it's balance of probability. You're right, you never know for 100%. Someone might wake up tomorrow morning and go, I hate the Shetland Tourism Board.
Yeah, especially with increased hacktivism, right?
Well, yeah, sure, but you've got to say some people are more likely to get hacktivism than others. If you're a security company, absolutely, you should accept you're targeted. I mean, that's been obviously proven. But otherwise, yeah.
I was going to say that the counterpoint is if you're doing the testing and you're on the carpet then you should expect not doing any part.
Correct. I agree with you entirely. I agree with you. Threat modeling, without threat modeling, you're blind, you're testing blind.
It's just thinking that managing the threat is more important than managing the vulnerability. So moving to the Shetland Tourist Board is the best way to reduce your risk.
If you work for them, you're much more less likely to get targeted. I would argue that managing the threat, right now managing the vulnerability is all. And it needs to be partially saying, who am I actually being threatened by? And when I'm doing testing, I should be targeting that threat model. And you have to get to approximately, I agree, you're never going to be 100% right, but you could be a lot better than just blindly saying, I'm just going to do the pen test on my exterior perimeter, which unfortunately is where a lot of companies are. Some companies are better than that, but a lot of companies you see will just buy the pen test every year because they've been told they have to have the pen test. And that's not the best bang for buck. And then you can go up from there. And these are all assessments. So what I would argue is that where you have companies who are less mature, so they don't understand their security posture or they don't understand where their vulnerabilities lie, that they are far better to be looking at an assessment style methodology. So instead of doing goal-based, what you're trying to do is say, here's where you're weak, here's where you're strong. But we'll go in probably white box. We won't go in black box, because you waste a lot of time doing black box, where in reality, they might benefit better from being told, here's where you're strong, here's where you're weak, here's where you're doing things badly. And we do that more quickly, more effectively, than spending a lot of time researching a given vulnerability when actually you've got password to password. And then pen test obviously at the bottom. But then, once you've done that, I predicted people would know about this. Threat modeling needs to be done first. The right type of test for a customer. So, assessment style, yeah. So if you've got people who are less developed, they should be getting assessment style testing. If you've got people who are more developed, they should be getting, absolutely, at that point, penetration testing, style testing, goal-based testing makes sense. But it's actually getting the right type of testing for the right customer. Yeah.
I was going to say, the other thing that we often do actually test controls. So we know that
Yeah.
the same thing like the control that manages a risk down to the level of they deem acceptable. We then test whether the control actually does manage the risk down or whether the control fails.
Yeah.
So we'll take an onion skin approach. Well, work our way from the outside in through all the levels of control and test each of those controls, not necessarily.
But that's a more considered approach to scoping. I think the problem you see with scoping is this idea of one size fits all and one type of testing fits all. And unfortunately, things like PCI and things like the use of the word pen testing, this is why thus pen testing must die. It's not that I think that trying to assess your security is a bad idea, it's that I really hate the fact that everything's a pen test.
Ask for an IT health check.
Ask for IT health, ask for some, yeah, it's what you call it doesn't really matter. The problem is that people have, you need to start off by getting regulators in the industry off starting to use the word pen testing. And unfortunately, the thing that really concerns me is it's taken 5 years to really get the word pen testing in. You know, you go back 5 years and people weren't, you know, it wasn't even assessed you have to. Now it's taken 5 years to get business around to the idea that you have to do something. And unfortunately, what they've hooked onto is the idea that the thing you have to do is the pen test. And now you're going to take another period of time to say, okay, we've now got that far. Actually, we didn't really mean that. What we meant was you want to do some threat modeling, you want to assess your risk appropriately, and then you want to target your testing. So, I'll probably have some more text. Underwriters Labs. Has anyone heard of the Underwriters Labs? Okay, the Underwriters Labs, they assess things, and notably they assess safes. And you know what they don't say about safes when they assess a safe? They don't say either yes, it was safe or no, it wasn't. What they do is they say, how long is that safe able to resist what type of attack on what part of the safe? So they say, they'll rate it as saying 30 minutes with handheld tools on all 6 sites. That kind of assessment sounds to me more like what you should be doing on security. And when you're assessing your security, you're saying, what aspect of my industry, for how long, using what tools? And providing a report that says that. Because then at least someone can say, here's what I think I've already tested against and here's what I haven't.
That's what car security devices are sold on as well. Sold secure mark means that an average speed for the power drill will take more than 5 minutes to break in. They're not saying your car won't be in it.
Exactly, but that's my point, is the fact that at the moment you look at, to an extent, I mean, I'm generalising by necessity, but but in a lot of cases the pen test is being sold as this system has now been done the pen test and it is tick box or not tick box. And then what you really want to say is, we spent this long with this number of tools on this scope. So, for example, explicit saying whether you did or didn't do social engineering, saying you kind of still need to do this stuff because we didn't. And social engineering currently this year, its flavor of the year, is the way people are getting in. And yet it doesn't get tested. People might think, well, I've had the pen test, I'm okay. No, you're not. So the Underwriters Labs approach seems to me to be a better way of doing it. Specifying what does in scope, resistant for a specific duration, and it specifies what type of attacker you were actually emulating. So, those are the slides. Any more questions?
I just have an extra data point, which is that I mainly work with for ISVs, and they'll ask for a penetration test, and I just say, well, no, because that's probably not what you mean.
Yeah.
Because that basically means finding one of your customers and then trying to break your customer, which isn't good customer relations. Or like if it's an iPhone app, then like your customer, their coffee shop, their ISP, Apple, and a bunch of other people who have far too expensive lawyers for you to even worry about discretion, GitHub and so forth. Are all part of the things. So, you can't penetration test it. I can tell you whether your app has vulnerabilities in it, but that's not what you say.
I know. The legal problem tends to be a really nasty one. I mean, definitely in this world of outsourcing, I mean, you've got companies like Amazon and Google who take a frankly realistic approach to this, where they'll actually pay you to find stuff in their systems. And you've got a lot of companies where if you try and touch their systems, you can forget it. We want to do a pen test on your stuff. No.
Well, that's the problem with legislators as well. Legislators are not that
Yep. Yep, absolutely. And it's this aspect of any type of attack is automatically malicious and therefore illegal. But the problem is, from a liability perspective, if you go testing, the reason that they do that is they've got availability uptime. So the reason the way outsourcers sell their stuff to clients is an SLA. The SLA is uptime. The SLA is in security, it's uptime. So if you knock a system over, that's what they risk to it. Then they will lose money on their SLA, and that's all they care about. So if test knocks, so their incentive is to say, no, I'm not going to let you test because you might knock it over, and if you do knock it over, it's going to cost me money.
It's part of the thing that we've struggled so hard to get modular testing in.
I know.
I've got a project I'm developing this. We really want to do some security testing, but what we want to do is like test that bit that you built is secure, right? Or is not vulnerable to the range of attacks. We don't want to test the whole environment, the infrastructure, the people that are going to be using it, the processes around it.
The problem is when it slots in, and it slots into an existing environment, so it slots into it which involves these people. And what the business ultimately, we talked before that the business and what business care about money. If you slot a nice secure thing into an insecure process, and then that gets hacked, even though it wasn't that, you know who's going to take it in the neck? It's the guy who said that was secure.
Yeah.
Even though it was actually something, so the problem is scope against, I think you were next. Back again.
I think one of the things you need to find a way to develop a good practice, because I know for a fact that there are companies that are getting testing done right. The fact is, the company you already work for was doing VA scanning probably 10 years ago, and they progressed from that point onwards. And 10 years ago was what they did. It's very, very different. And there are other companies, lots of companies out there that do that.
It comes down to customer education in a large part, which is one of the reasons I'm doing this talk. It comes down to customer education because until customers know that they shouldn't ask for that, until customers know that actually you need to actually give it a bit more thought to that, and if you ask for that you won't get what you want, then they're not going to. And until no one asks for it, I'll tell you what, no sales guy will sell it. Or sales guys might, but a lot of sales guys won't. They'll just go, I can sell this and I can make my bonus this month. Or I can spend a whole lot of time trying to educate the customer and I may or may not make a sale. So I'm going to do it the easy way.
I think all that comes down to the maturity of the industry, because you were mentioning the customers don't know what they want to buy.
Yep.
You were mentioning earlier on that you were comparing, for instance, the security model of saying or picking or picking. Well, in those areas, you know what the threats are, you know what the attack vectors are. You can identify them quickly, and they are well known. I mean, there is unlikely to be a big secret no one knows about. In your world, they are all days. And it's something you can try to predict and prevent.
One of the problems is
they're new techniques every day.
Well, the problem is, what was good pen testing 5 years ago isn't good pen testing now. What the good attacks were 5 years ago are not the same now. Absolutely. And that's kind of what makes it a challenge, because it won't stay put. But
and that's also why that's the next place where, at the same point, we were talking about different, scope testing, where when you have a testing company, you get to test one specific module or one new functionality on an application, and then you get someone else who puts it together, and the whole system ends up being vulnerable because it has never been tested, once assembled, and it's always the implementation.
Or you buy the component from somewhere else and they didn't do their job.
But in terms of process, the business doesn't understand that. And the reason why it doesn't understand that, and that's how you close the loop, is because they don't understand security.
Yes.
If they did, they wouldn't make those mistakes.
So, you're right. It's all about maturity, but
when can you start addressing that?
Well,
because if you go to a customer today as a fantasy company and you try to teach them,
I'd argue it's
you won't get funded to teach them what you mean by security and to teach them how wrong they're going to get and why you should pay your money on you teaching them.
So I'd argue it's the industry. I'd argue that, for example, in the UK, Crest is a great example. Crest should be, because that's exactly what they're there to do. They're there to say, we're an industry body of pen testing companies, and we should be able to get some budget, hopefully, from either our customers or our suppliers to say, hey guys, here's how you should be doing this properly. Here's practices you can use which will improve that. So Crest and or the government and or regulators, PCI being a bit more granular.
But
essentially buying happens exactly the same problems as you're out on it. I've been in a room with HMG, I was just in it, and they say, we don't know what we should be asking for. But there are developments occurring. Things are improving, but the improvement only comes at a very, very slow rate. And some companies are up here, some companies are getting all of the companies up here.
And the problem is that the threat moves very, very quickly. So it's a classic problem. You're up against corporates who move very slowly by their nature. 50,000 person company does not move quickly. You get attackers who will innovate next week because they found a new vector, the new way of doing it, and they'll just go. And then Verizon, I don't know, Verizon report came out a couple of dadays ago. It was fascinating because it showed how many completely basic attacks, because they'll just go in the easiest point. They won't go, so they were saying that the best thing to do is actually just focus on getting a low level across everything, because frankly, then you'll be up above most of the opportunistic attackers. So unless you're a real target of choice, focusing on getting the basics right everywhere is actually more important than focusing on having really high stuff up here in one place, because they'll just come in at the side. And I am almost dead on time. Fantastic. One more talk. Question.
there was a point earlier about how do you educate customers and how do you make sure that they know what they want. I think that if as an industry we can't give customers what they want without them knowing what it is, then we're doing something wrong. Because good user experience is about giving people what they need.
Yes.
Not what they ask for.
Very true.
So we shouldn't expect our customers to be security experts.
Yeah.
Engage as security experts.
True. The problem there is that sales incentives, a salesman's incentive, it might be different from what's good practice, which is unfortunate but true. I think I am out of time in this case, people feel like filing in.